We've gone through some tough times. I don't know where you are in your life right now. I don't know what brought you here. I don't know if you're in a really tough place. Maybe you lost a family member or friend during this pandemic. I don't know if you're in a tough place in your business. Maybe it was shut down. I don't know if you've had some tough times with your kids. I don't know, maybe perhaps you're doing great. Many people have figured out now how to adapt and really start to do well, and you're just looking for some new momentum. But whatever reason you came here, I just want you to know I'm here to serve you the next 5 days. This is a commitment from my heart and soul to you. And I over-deliver. There's no charge for this. I'm trying to add as much value as possible. This came about because in 2020, suddenly I was going to be able to serve people. And this is my mission. I have 105 companies. I do business all around the world in a variety of ways. But this has been my life since I was 17 years old. This is my 45th year. I'm just about to begin doing this, which blows my mind. I started when I was 2, of course, right? Hey, stop that. But what I say in those 45 years, I'd be an idiot if I hadn't recognized. I don't have to be smart. Traveling around the world in more than 150 countries, I do business in 195, and meeting people from all walks of life, from the most challenged to the most successful. You have to start to notice there are patterns that'll make you sad, angry, frustrated, overwhelmed, patterns that'll make you passionate, alive, grateful, excited, driven. And those patterns, sometimes we start thinking we are a pattern because we've done it so long. And what I want to show you this week is you can break through those patterns and truly create a different life without any BS, without a bunch of hyperbole or positive thinking. Because I don't believe in positive thinking if you're coming here. I believe in intelligence. The point is, I started in a tough time, and my mom was a beautiful soul. I would not be who I am without her. I would not speak her name in vain. But she also, unfortunately, got addicted to prescription drugs and alcohol, and the mix changed her into a different person, where I had to try and protect my brother and sister, where I went through some pretty intense experiences, thinking I was lying to her, pouring liquid soap down my throat till I threw up, banging my head against the wall. And it sounds pretty horrific. But honestly, I knew she loved me through it all. Her intentions were the greatest. And for me, it made me a practical psychologist, because I had to figure out as a little boy, how the hell do I manage her mental and emotional state so it doesn't get crazy, to protect my brother and sister. So it started with that. And then I had no answers. So I had no role models. There was nobody in my family that had succeeded in business or anything of that nature. So while I'm still in junior high school, I decided to take a speed reading course, and I decided I was going to read a book a day. And of course, I didn't do that. It's a big target, but I read about 700 books, a little more than that, over 7 years. And they were all in the area of human development, psychology, physiology. And a lot of it was repetitive, but as it repeated, I started to own it instead of understand it. You know what I mean? It's like you can intellectually say, oh, I know that. But if you're not doing it, you don't know it, you understand it. And so I got enough repetition. And then my life changed because I was in high school. I was a sophomore in high school, and I was trying to support my family, and I worked as a busboy and a bunch of other things and went to school. And on the weekends, I tried to find other work to help stimulate. And my mom had a friend who had done well selling real estate in Orange County, California in the 70s. And he had been completely broke before. And so he used to, revamp a house and then sell it and buy another and revamp it. And he needed somebody to move stuff. And so, I was a pretty tall kid at that stage, just starting to. I was 5'1" the beginning of my sophomore year. I grew 10 inches in a year. And so bottom line is okay, he's a good mover. I was a hard worker. And my dad used to say, this guy used to be such a loser, and now he's so successful. And he goes, I don't know what happened. And so one lunchtime during the time I was working this man, he goes, you're a hard worker, man. I'm going to hire you every time. You're incredible. I said, well, thank you. And I said, but I want to know how you became so successful, because my dad said you used to be such a loser. Only kids can say this stuff, right? I literally said it to him. He said, Dad said, what? And he goes, well, that's probably fair. He said, I had some tough times. I said, well, what changed you? He said, I went to a seminar. I had never even heard of such a thing. I said, what's a seminar? He said, well, it's where this man takes all he's learned in his whole life and converts it into a few hours or a few days and teaches you so you don't have to learn by trial and error, and so you can learn quicker and faster and eliminate all the bumps and challenges and succeed quicker. If you haven't, he was a beautiful personal development speaker at the time, and I said, well, that seminar changed you that much? He said, yes. I said, could you get me into one? And he said, sure. And then he didn't say anything else. I said, well, will you? And he said, no way. I said, why not? He said, because you got to pay for it. I said, well, I work as a janitor. I make $40 a week at the time. And he goes, well, it's $35 for the seminar. I said, that's a week's pay. And yet he said, okay, well then just don't go and learn on your own and see how many decades it takes. He said, or pony up. And it was one of the most important decisions of my life. It took a week's pay. I went to the seminar. I sat there, and I'd read so many books that some of the things he said I recognized. I started finishing them. I'm, yelling it out in the seminar to this man. But that day launched a different view in me where I was so excited. I wanted to learn everything I could. And I learned some very simple things that day that were philosophical, but your philosophy of life affects the way you think and feel and live. He wasn't so much a strategist. He was more like a business and personal philosopher. And he used to say, look, Tony, for things to change for you, you've got to change. For things to get better, you got to get better. And so he became that initial teacher, and I eventually went to work for him. And then I just became obsessed with finding answers. And so that path basically grew. At some point, I started doing my own programs, and because I'd learned enough to be able to do some small seminars. And then I learned something called NLP. Some of you may have heard of neuro-linguistic programming, and I got to be one of the best in the world at it. And I was taking people and I was challenging. I'd get on a radio show and challenge a psychiatrist or psychologist and say, give me your worst patient. I'll hand him in 1 hour because I am the one-stop therapist, right? Well, you're crazy. And then I would challenge him. I'd do these free guest events. And, I started in Vancouver, Canada. I did these get on the radio and, people would challenge me and I'd say, well, bring me your worst patient. And I remember the first one they ever brought was this woman who had a snake phobia. And in this snake phobia, she found herself in this position where she'd been treated for, I think it was 7 years at the time. And if you don't know phobia, it's an uncontrolled response to something. And the person said, you're a liar, you're a charlatan, you say you can handle people in an hour, it can take years for these types of things. And I said, give me one of your patients. Give me somebody you've never been able to cure. I said, I'm sure you've got plenty of those, right? If you're going to attack me, I know how to take care of myself here, right? And so long story short, I said, listen, tell me the problem. Snake phobia describes it. This woman would fall asleep. She had these vicious dreams. A snake was biting her. And I don't know if you had dreams like that where they're so intense, but your adrenal glands fire off and then you wake up. Well, this was happening 3 or 4 times a night. I said, well, how long have you been treating her? And he said, 7 years. And I was like, oh, bring her. That should take me about 30 or 40 minutes, right? And by making that kind of a challenge, this guy got really upset. He goes, well, this. And I said, listen, the guy says, I'll see you tomorrow night at the Holiday Inn. And so long story short, and I get the Holiday Inn. I don't know if you've done this. You ever talk to somebody on the phone and then I can't help it. I make a picture in my head of what they look like. How many of you do that? If you just talk to somebody on the phone, you kind of get a picture? And so I picture this huge man standing there, this giant person, right, with such intensity. And I'm watching the audience. In those days, I introduced myself. I got a room for about 500 people. And sure enough, it's stuffed with people because everybody wants to see the shootout between me and the psychiatrist. And the bottom line is nobody matches my picture of a giant man with a scared woman on his arm. That's what I was looking for. And so finally, I get up and I introduce myself. I say, I'm Tony Robbins. I want to thank you for coming tonight. I said, I'm going to share with you some tools tonight that you probably would think would take months or years to make a change, where we can do it in minutes or maybe an hour. And I said, I know that sounds an exaggeration, but it's real. And then right at that time, like a movie, the side door bursts open and this guy about this tall walks in with his woman wrapped around his arm. He storms through the crowd to the very front. Right? And then right at that moment, literally, he goes, here's the woman. As I tried to shake his hand, he wouldn't even shake my hand. So I helped this woman get up. I sat her in this chair and I said, let's start fresh. How many of you heard me on the radio that night? And almost everybody raised their hand. I said, well, this is the lady in question. And I said, ma'am, I understand you have certain feelings about snakes. And I screamed at it and she shook and went crazy, right? So I calmed her down and I said, okay, ma'am, I understand you've had this for 7 years, treated by that psychiatrist right there. I said, let's see if we can wipe this out in the next 10, 15, 20 minutes. And then I did a series of these simple techniques to change the way your mind, your brain, and body responds to things. That's the essence of what I've learned to do. And there's so many ways to do it now, not just NLP. But in those days, I knew how to do that. So I did these techniques. And then I said, how do you feel about snakes? No shaking, no response. Pretty cool. But I came prepared. So I walked behind her back in here and I reached into this table and I pulled out this little knapsack. And as I started bringing it up right beside her, it started to move and the audience realized what was about to happen. And I reached down and said, how do you feel about snakes? And I got quite a reaction, screaming, shaking, the whole 9 yards. But then I did this little trigger for her and she calmed down and the snake's still here. And I said, how do you feel about snakes? And she goes, they're not very attractive. Right? And I said, okay. I said, but look at, you're not screaming, you're not shaking, and it's a real snake right in front of you. She goes, that's amazing. I said, would you be willing to hold it? She goes, it's not very attractive. I said, yes, but if you held it, you'd really know you conquered it. And then the audience starts jumping in, hold it, hold it, hold it, right? So she grabs the snake, starts to squeeze it. I said, don't kill it, right? And that launched my career. And then that became my signature. Get a result so you can prove this stuff works with people. And so I started doing these guest events and I started turning people around with a variety of challenges. Somebody that was addicted to a drug, somebody who was overeating. And so that started to become my signature, and then gradually I started working with sports teams, individuals. I turned around way back in the LA Olympics. That's how old I am, back in the 80s. I turned around, the swimmer wasn't supposed to win, he won the gold medal, and so it just grew from that. Then I was working with Princess Diana, Nelson Mandela, Mother Teresa, and the President of the United States. And so what made that possible that I want to share with you this week is understanding the power of patterns.